It's me again, and today, I'm telling you a story that's not just chilling, it's real in ways that will shake you. My name's Ethan Black, I'm 29, and this is a true story I stumbled on during my time in Maine, a short moment that turned into an obsession. You see, this story starts with a girl named Elara Fallon, just 24, whose quiet life cracked open like rotten glass when she discovered something dark buried under her family's perfect image. And trust me, what happened next? It wasn't just unexpected, it was brutal. But before I tell you everything, let me give you a glimpse. One letter, one funeral, one secret too dangerous to be left alone. If this short glimpse caught your attention, don't skip the full video, because the horror buried in this family's past will leave you shaken. And hey, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with someone who thinks their family has drama. This story is written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries, and now it begins. Elara Fallon had always lived in the shadow of wealth and silence. Her father, Thomas Fallon, was a respected attorney in their hometown of Cumberland, Maine, and her mother a woman of old Boston money was the perfect housewife with a stiff smile and cold hands. Elara's childhood was wrapped in rules, charity galas, and the unspoken demand to never ask too many questions. But everything changed after her brother Caleb's funeral. He died in what the news called a tragic kayaking accident. But even as the town mourned the golden boy, Elara couldn't shake the feeling something was wrong. Caleb had called her 2 nights before he died, whispering, "They're watching me, and if anything happens, look in the piano." The call had dropped, and she never got to ask what he meant. Weeks later, grief turned into obsession. Her family seemed too calm, too staged, and when she finally broke the lock on their grandmother's old upright piano, the one that had sat untouched for years in the wedding formal parlor, she found a sealed envelope inside. A single key, a photo of a young girl with bloodshot eyes, and a note scribbled in Caleb's handwriting. "This is where it begins. Look for the name Harper Creed." Elara's world tilted. She had never heard that name, but her gut screamed that her brother had been killed. And this was his breadcrumb trail. Her search took her first to the county records office, then to the archives at her old high school, and finally to a woman named Irene, an old librarian with tremors in her hands and warnings in her voice. "You shouldn't go poking around that name, dear," Irene said. "Some ghosts in this town don't want to be dug up." But Elara couldn't stop. She found Harper Creed in a 1996 yearbook, listed as a transfer student from somewhere in Georgia. But after that, nothing. No graduation photo, no death records. It was like she vanished. Around that time, Elara started feeling followed. A black SUV parked across her apartment. More than once, her phone buzzed with blocked calls that never spoke. Someone was listening, watching. When she finally confronted her mother about Caleb's death, the woman's face went pale. But she said nothing, not a word. That silence felt like confirmation. Elara's next move was drastic. She broke into her father's home office late one night, hoping to find more about Harper or the key, but instead she found a file labeled Creed CASE, closed 2001. The contents were worse than she imagined. There were photos, court documents, a restraining order against Thomas Fallon, testimonies from a girl named Harper describing years of stalking, threats, and fear, but no charges, no arrests, just a closed file. Elara realized the girl in the piano photo was Harper, and her father had destroyed her. But why? Why hide it? And why would Caleb know about it? As she scanned the documents, one slipped free from the folder. It was a private investigator's report. Harper Creed, presumed deceased, last known location, Brook Hollow Mental Institution, shut down 2004. Suddenly the key made sense. Elara looked at it again. It was rusted and old, the kind used for lockers or cells, and the name stamped on it? BH42 Brook Hollow. That's where she had to go next. But what she didn't know yet was that someone else was watching every step, and they weren't going to let her get to the truth so easily. By the time she left the house, the black SUV had followed her home. The past wasn't just catching up, it was alive and hunting her now. Elara Fallon's hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel, the rusted key marked BH42, resting on the passenger seat like a curse she couldn't put down. Brook Hollow Mental Institution had been closed for over 2 decades, sealed after a string of lawsuits and unexplained patient deaths. But the trail of her brother's warning had led her here, and something deep inside her insisted Harper Creed was still the key to the nightmare her family had buried. As the sun bled out behind the dense pine trees of Maine's outskirts, the crumbling silhouette of Brook Hollow came into view, gray and hollowed like a skeleton of secrets. Elara parked behind a tree-line, heart thudding like a drum. The black SUV from earlier, nowhere in sight for now. Armed with a flashlight, the piano key, and her brother's photo of Harper, She crossed the rusting gate and entered through a broken window on the east wing, glass crunching under her boots. The interior stank of mildew and silence, the walls peeled like old skin, graffiti smeared across every surface, but when she reached the hallway labeled Patient Records B Wing, something shifted in the air. It felt colder, heavier, like the building was holding its breath. She found locker 42, half hidden behind a broken vending machine. With one click, the key turned, and inside was a moldy envelope wrapped in plastic. Inside, a journal, Harper's pages soaked in trauma ink blurred by tears. As Elara flipped through it by flashlight, a voice began to form. Harper had been institutionalized at 17, committed by her own parents after claiming that Thomas Fallon, a prominent figure in town, had been stalking her since she was 14. The journal detailed night after night of seeing him outside her window, how her evidence was dismissed, how her therapist began gaslighting her, and how she eventually snapped and tried to end her life. Her entries darkened over time. By page 76, Harper believed the doctors were drugging her to keep her compliant and that someone inside Brook Hollow was working for Thomas Fallon. But the final page was the one that twisted Elara's stomach into knots. I was right. They lied. There is no record of me here. He made sure of that. But if someone finds this, find my sister. She'll know the truth. Her name is Kala. Don't trust anyone named Fallon, especially not the girl. Elara froze. The girl? Did Harper mean her? She was a Fallon, but she'd never heard of a Kala. She flipped back through the journal looking for more, but suddenly her flashlight blinked once, twice, and died. In the pitch-black silence, Elara's breath caught in her throat as she heard footsteps not far down the hall. Someone else was in the building. She stuffed the journal into her backpack and crept down a side hallway, pushing through a broken office door and hiding behind an overturned desk. The footsteps grew louder, deliberate, booted through the thin crack of light beneath the door. She saw shadows moving, then a voicemail, calm, methodical. She's here. I saw the car. Check the records wing. Elara didn't breathe until the footsteps retreated. She waited a full 5 minutes before bolting out the side she came in from and racing back to her car. Once inside, she locked the doors and cried in silent panic, making her body tremble as though someone else had hijacked it. She realized then this wasn't just about Harper. Someone was actively trying to keep the truth buried and was willing to kill to do it. Back home, she scanned the journal's pages again and finally noticed something odd. Certain letters were circled faintly throughout the entries as though Harper had been leaving a cipher. It took her hours, but eventually the message became clear. He is not your father. The room spun. Thomas Fallon, her father, wasn't even blood. That would explain the coldness, the lack of affection, the distance, but who was her real father? And what did this have to do with Caleb's death? Elara called the only person she could trust, her godmother, June Caldwell, a retired nurse who had been close to her biological mother, Evelyn, who died in a car accident when Elara was just 5. June's voice cracked when Elara asked about the truth. Sweetheart, your mother. She was scared. She never trusted Thomas. She said if anything happened to her, it wouldn't be an accident. June agreed to meet her the next day at a small cafe in Portland, but when Elara arrived the next morning, she was greeted not by June, but by police tape. A waitress told her a woman had collapsed in the bathroom overnight. No ID, no phone, just a note that said, "Tell Elara I'm sorry." June was dead. Elara couldn't breathe. That made 2 people, now Caleb and June, dead after trying to protect her. She knew she was next. Unless she moved fast, she went to a motel under a different name, ditched her phone, and spent the night scanning everything from Brook Hollow into a burner laptop. It was then she found a clue in Harper's journal that she'd missed before. Kala's real name isn't Kala. She had to change it. She's in South Barrack now, works at a bookstore, looks just like Mom. Elara drove 4 hours the next day to South Barrack and found the bookstore with the yellow awning that Harper had drawn in her journal. Inside, she saw her, a woman in her early 40s, pale, raven-haired, same sharp eyes as Harper. Elara approached her with a photo. Are you Kala Creed? The woman froze. Who's asking? Elara introduced herself. When Kala heard the name Fallon, her face went white. Get in the back room now, behind a curtain and into a small office. Kala locked the door and said the words Elara had been dreading. If you're a Fallon, you need to understand what your family really did. What followed was a truth that shattered everything Elara thought she knew. Kala explained that Harper had been her younger sister. Their family had moved to Maine to escape a predator, Thomas Fallon, after Harper caught him hurting another girl at a church retreat. Harper told her parents, but Fallon was powerful. He threatened them. When their parents tried to press charges suddenly, their finances dried up. Their father lost his job. Harper was labeled unstable, committed, quieted after Brook Hollow. Harper went missing, but Calla never stopped looking. She tracked down rumors that Harper had tried to contact a journalist years later, and that same journalist mysteriously died in a house fire. Your brother, Calla said, found me 2 years ago. He said he was investigating your father. He believed Harper had a child. Elara blinked. A child? Calla nodded. Harper gave birth in the institution. We think she was drugged. Manipulated, but the baby disappeared. No records, no adoption, nothing. Elara's hands began to sweat. You think that child? Calla nodded again. We think it was you. The floor seemed to vanish beneath Elara. Was that why Caleb left? The key? Why he told her to find Harper? Was Caleb not her full brother, but someone who found out and died for it? If that's true, Elara whispered, then why would Thomas Fallon raise me? Calla's eyes narrowed. Because he's obsessed. And because he wanted to erase the evidence of what he did. Elara stood, heart hammering. It was too much. Too fast, her whole identity cracking. But there was no time to fall apart, because when she checked her car after leaving the bookstore, the window had been shattered, the journal was gone, and on the seat was a single photo. It was her as a baby held by a nurse. In the corner, scrawled in black marker, "Welcome home, Harper's daughter." Elara looked up across the street. The black SUV waited again. Elara Fallon, or whoever she truly was, stood frozen beside her shattered car, her breath fogging the cool Maine air as her gaze locked on the black SUV idling across the street like a shadow that refused to die, its windows tinted. Too dark to see the eyes behind them, but she could feel their weight like a hand pressed to her throat. The photo left on her seat was unmistakable, her as a newborn held by a nurse in Brook Hollow. A date scrawled faintly in the corner, 2001. That meant she wasn't Thomas Fallon's daughter at all. She was Harper Creed's, the product of a horror story locked away behind asylum walls, erased from history, raised by the very man who had destroyed her mother. Rage and panic tangled in her chest like barbed wire as she drove away fast, ditching the car 5 blocks down and blending into foot traffic through South Barracks downtown streets until she ducked into a gas station bathroom, locked the door, and threw up everything: her breakfast, her fear, her entire identity. She stayed there until her legs stopped shaking, then bought a cheap hoodie, paid in cash, and caught a bus back toward Portland, where she booked a room under the name Harper Calla at a dingy motel near the docks. That night she tried to call Elara Creed again, no answer. When she went back the next morning, the bookstore was shuttered, yellow tape across the door. Another death, another warning. The TV said it was a suspected gas leak, but Elara knew better. She was being hunted, silenced, just like Harper, just like Caleb. But what they didn't know, what Thomas Fallon hadn't counted on, was that the truth had already begun to spread. Before she lost the journal, Elara had uploaded photos of every page to a secure cloud account and created a folder labeled "If I Disappear." She shared the link anonymously with 3 journalists in a Reddit forum for unsolved cold cases, posting under the name Creed Bloodline. But before she could do anything more, she needed answers, real ones, and that meant confronting the one person who had orchestrated all of it. Thomas Fallon. With no other choice, she returned to the Fallon estate, the mansion on the hill where her false childhood had played out like a carefully rehearsed lie, and used the spare key under the garden frog statue like she always had. Inside, everything was exactly as she remembered: sterile, polished, soulless portraits of the perfect Fallon family on the wall, her father's law plaques, her mother's empty perfume bottles, all untouched by grief. After Caleb's death, she went to his office, the same one she'd broken into weeks earlier, but this time there was a manila envelope on the desk with her name handwritten across it. Inside, a birth certificate with the name Baby Girl Creed, no father listed, hospital bracelet, Brook Hollow discharge summary, and a photo of Harper, gaunt and bruised, holding a newborn with haunted eyes. On the back of the photo, in her mother's handwriting, "She's better off with him than with ghosts." Elara barely registered the sound of the door opening behind her. Thomas Fallon stood there, silver hair, neatly combed, suit perfectly pressed, a glass of scotch in his hand, like they were about to sit down for family dinner. "You found her," he said calmly. "You always were clever, even as a child." Elara didn't speak, her hands clenched at her sides, heart racing, every cell screaming to run or fight. He moved closer, slow and unthreatening, like a lawyer approaching a jury. "I wanted to tell you the truth," he said, sipping his drink. "But your mother insisted. She thought you'd be safer never knowing she was right." Elara laughed bitterly. "You drugged Harper, you had her institutionalized, you raised me as your daughter, you killed Caleb. He didn't flinch. Your brother made mistakes. He got curious. He was emotionally unstable. He couldn't handle the truth. You murdered him, she snapped. He was going to expose you. Thomas sighed and set his glass down. What would exposing me have accomplished, Elara? You'd be just another broken girl with no family, no future, and a legacy soaked in madness I gave you. Everything safety, education, power, and what have you done with it? You've tried to burn it all down. Elara stepped back. You don't get to define my legacy. No, he said softly. But I do get to end it. The lights in the office. Cut out. The house plunged into darkness. She lunged backward, heart hammering, as she slammed the door and locked it, yanking open the window behind the desk and crawling out just as footsteps thundered down the hallway. She hit the ground hard, ran through the yard, scaled the side fence, and didn't stop until she reached the highway. At a diner near the bus station, she used a stranger's phone to access her cloud drive. The link had exploded. Reddit threads had gone viral. One journalist had already emailed back. Meet in person. We're digging deeper. What you've uncovered could take down half the legal system in Maine. But Elara knew she wouldn't be safe until she had undeniable, public, irreversible proof, and she knew where that was. In a cabin that Caleb had owned. The one no one in the family talked about. The one he'd retreated to every summer like it was a sanctuary. She drove there under cover of night, switching rental cars twice, wearing a wig and sunglasses. Like she was on the run, which she was. The cabin was remote, hidden deep in the forest near Moosehead Lake, and everything inside was untouched. Caleb's journals, his laptop, boxes of documents. As dawn rose, she uncovered the final truth. A hard drive with videos Caleb had recorded, secretly conversations between Thomas Fallon and corrupt doctors, footage of a hidden nursery at Brook Hollow, and one final file labeled Confession. In it, Caleb stood in front of a white wall and said, if you're seeing this, I'm probably dead, and if I'm dead, it was him, my father, or the man I thought was my father. Thomas Fallon raped Harper Creed. He covered it up using state connections, committed her, and stole her child. That child is my sister, my real sister, Elara. If you're seeing this, you need to know. You were born in hell, but you don't have to die in it. Expose him. Burn it all down. The screen went black. Elara sobbed for her brother, for Harper, for the years of lies, but more than grief, there was fury, now cold-focused fury. She sent the video to every contact she'd made in the past 2 weeks. Within 24 hours, it was everywhere. News stations, social media, investigative outlets. Fallon's name trended globally. The FBI opened an inquiry. A week later, Thomas Fallon was arrested while trying to board a private jet to the Cayman Islands. Elara watched it on live TV, her hands shaking, but justice came at a cost. Her mother vanished before arrest. Caleb was still presumed dead, and Elara was placed under witness protection. The government offered her a new name. She chose Harper Creed, her true bloodline, her true legacy. And as she walked away from the ashes of the Fallon dynasty, she knew she hadn't just avenged her family, she'd become the fire they couldn't silence. Her name was no longer Elara Fallon. That identity had died the moment Thomas Fallon was dragged out of the Portland airport in handcuffs, his legacy crumbling in front of live cameras as every lie, every crime, every silent scream that had built. The Fallon name was exposed in a public reckoning that left Maine's elite gasping for breath. Now she was Harper Creed, the daughter of a woman stripped of justice, the sister of a boy who died for truth, the survivor of a machine built on manipulation and blood. The news ran 24/7 for weeks. Prominent lawyer arrested in shocking abuse cover-up. Former mental institution tied to human rights scandal. Daughter of asylum victim reveals shocking family connection, but the press only scratched the surface. The real storm was still brewing behind the curtain. Despite the viral videos, the court system dragged its feet. Fallon's lawyers filed motions, spun PR campaigns, and the state's attorney general, a man who had once played golf with Thomas, delayed charges, citing ongoing investigation complexities. Harper knew the game wasn't over. The machine still had gears turning, so she made a choice to finish what her brother started, no matter what it cost. She contacted the 3 journalists she trusted most and offered them exclusive access to everything. Caleb's hard drives, Brook Hollow patient records, her own DNA tests that proved Harper Creed was her biological mother. Then she went one step further. She created a video of her own sitting in a blank motel room, camera shaking slightly as she held her palms flat in her lap. She looked into the lens and said, "My name is Harper Creed. My mother was drugged, raped, institutionalized. My brother was killed. I was stolen, and the man who did it raised me as his daughter lied to me every single day of my life. But not anymore. The world deserves to know what happens when rich men bury their sins beneath the smiles of perfect families," she uploaded. Within hours, it was everywhere. Celebrities reposted it, politicians called for inquiries. Protesters showed up outside the Fallon estate holding signs that said "Justice for Harper," "Believe victims," and "Burn the Fallons down." The public outcry forced the Attorney General's hand. A grand jury was assembled, but behind the scenes, Harper received a warning. A man named Garrett Langston, a private investigator who had once worked for Fallon but turned after seeing the abuse, called her from a burner phone and said, "They're not done. Fallon has friends in deep places. He had a plan B. If he goes down, others go down too, and they won't let that happen quietly." Days later, the threats began. A package arrived at her temporary apartment in Chicago, where she'd been relocated under protection. Inside, a broken baby doll covered in red paint and a note that read, "Some secrets die with their mothers, you should have too." Harper didn't tell the agents watching her. Instead, she sent it to the press. Public pressure exploded again. That was her power now. She knew the truth, and she had an audience that believed her, but the next move wasn't hers. It was Fallon's. During a pretrial hearing, he shocked everyone by changing his plea to guilty, but not for what she expected. He admitted to professional misconduct, claimed he was mentally unfit during certain periods, and tried to plead insanity to avoid federal prison. Harper sat in the courtroom, her face emotionless, while her former father described his own crimes as a series of misunderstandings warped by overzealous investigators. The judge didn't buy it. The case moved forward, but something still didn't sit right that night. Harper received a call from a blocked number. It was a woman's voice, raspy, familiar, and filled with dread. "He didn't act alone," the voice said. "There's a list in the Brook Hollow archives, doctors, judges, lawmen. It's in room 407. He left it there as leverage in case he ever got caught." Then the line went dead. Harper knew what she had to do. She returned to the ruins of Brook Hollow alone, navigating the rotting corridors with a flashlight in her brother's map room. 407 was barricaded with rusted furniture, but she pushed through, coughing on dust and mold, until she found the filing cabinet. Inside, a sealed manila folder labeled "Silenced." It contained names over a dozen officials who had either helped commit Harper Creed or cover up the abuse, and photos of other girls. Evidence of a pattern that spanned decades. Fallon hadn't been a lone monster. He was part of something bigger. Harper left Brook Hollow that night with the folder pressed against her chest like a sacred text. The storm that followed its release reshaped the state of Maine forever. Several judges were indicted. 2 politicians resigned. The governor opened a task force to investigate historic abuse tied to mental institutions. And Harper Creed became more than a survivor. She became a symbol. Her story was taught in universities. Victims came forward from other cities, other families inspired by her voice. And yet through all the victory, the healing was slow. The nightmares remained. She still woke at night thinking about her brother's voice, about the cold eyes of the man who raised her. She visited Caleb's grave on a rainy afternoon in October, placed a photo of their real family, Harper Caleb, the baby who would become Elara, on the stone, and whispered, "I did it, we're free." But peace didn't come in full. It never does. She lived with the scars, the rage, the love for a brother who had died to show her who she really was. In the end, she disappeared from the public eye. No more interviews, no more cameras, just a small cabin in Vermont where she wrote a memoir titled "Whispers of Vengeance" and planted a weeping willow tree in memory of her mother. She never heard from Thomas Fallon again. He died in prison 3 years later, stabbed by another inmate who said he had the eyes of a liar. Harper didn't attend the funeral, but she smiled when she read the news, because some bloodlines are meant to end, and some daughters are meant to survive. Thanks for staying with this story till the very end. If this journey shook you, broke you, and healed you, like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who loves real, raw, dark stories. Your support keeps the truth alive. Even in fiction, this story is written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries.